Greetings, and welcome to my explication of sonnet number 97. Before we begin my explication, I would like to humbly entreat you to grab a coffee or any other preferred beverage, as this explication may take longer than others. In order to facilitate this explication in the fastest way possible, I have split it into 3 parts: 1 meter and alliteration, 2 punctuation and end start wording, and 3 word choice placement miscellany. At the end of each part, I will have a slide that shows my entire explication, should you be so curious to look at it. As you can tell by my analysis of the first line, this sonnet follows the typical iambic pentameter. However, as you can see on my analysis of the final line, there are some instances in which this is changed, as with the word here, dreading. Dreading is a present participle, one of many present participles and gerunds in this poem. And these gerunds serve a purpose to add a little bit of emphasis because of their stressed-unstressed structure, such as the weight of the wanton burden of the prime and the cruel nature of winter. There are also some instances of alliteration, as we see with in the third line, dark days, and further down we have widowed wombs, and these alliterations also contain within them some contrasts, such as dark days seen, days having light while being in the dark, and wombs giving life, whilst widowed is used to describe death. And again, if you so desire, this is my full explication. As we begin with the punctuation starting ending words, we will start with the ending punctuation of each line. As you can see here, there are 2 lines in which there is no ending punctuation, also known as enjambment, and in the first instance, you can see it's used to separate the phrase from the, to emphasize the point of separation. In the second instance, it's used to describe why this abundant issue described here seemed futile, had hope of orphans, unfathered fruit, etc., as signified by the use of this conjunction but. We also see the use of 3 exclamation marks within the first quatrain to sort of signify the despair and shock experienced by the narrator. As we move into the second quatrain, we begin with a semicolon, which expresses the idea of elaboration into the idea of summer's time and the teeming autumn, basically seasons which aren't winter. Another comma is used here in order to separate this whole adjective phrase. We also have this comma right here to separate the simile that's going on with like widowed wombs. As we move into the fourth line of second quatrain, last line of the octave, we have a colon, signifying that the narrator would stop talking about happy times and more onto sad, also as seen here by this secluded conjunction, yet. Again, second line of the sestet, we see a semicolon, such as we did at the first line of the second quatrain as a use, and it's used to sort of demonstrate some sort of elaboration. For summer and his pleasures wait on thee is why the everything before then seemed like hope for orphans or unfathered fruit to the narrator. The comma at the end of this line is used to separate the coordinating conjunction and. We see another colon at the end of that line in order to separate the conjunction or, which signifies contrast or some sort of alternate possibility. And the final 2 points of punctuation of significance are this comma right here, which is used to sort of create a natural pause before the word dreading, create more emphasis, and the period at the at the end of the word near and the end of the poem in general. Final couple points of significance in terms of punctuation. You have these commas here to separate this phrase thou away, again, a reference to the idea of separation as seen on line 2. And if you haven't noticed, the entire part of the poem here, after the 3 exclamation marks, are all part of one continuous sentence, signifying the endless nature of the metaphorical winter. Here's the full explication from that slide. Now we move on to Part 3, Word Choice, Placement, and Miscellany, which I have cut down from its original 9 minutes. You're welcome. Much like Sonnet 16, which had the idea of shall I compare thee to a summer's day, we start with an interrogative word, how, and a simile, like a winter. So this like a winter is comparing the poet's relationship to the young man to which this poem is addressed, and uses the word how to explain what extent. This use of the imagery of seasons can be seen throughout the poem, as we see here with the use of winter, here with the use of autumn, here with the use of summer, and the image of birds in order to represent the spring. However, Shakespeare, makes an interesting note by describing the year as being fleeting or elusive and passing all too quickly for the common man. However, the narrator throughout this poem describes time as passing ever so slowly through the winter, as you can see, the narrator poet's summer is described as being removed or taken away from him, and the benefits of autumn seem as described as being an abundant issue, which possesses the hope of orphans and unfathered fruit. The use of these contrasting symbols are meant to represent life and death, and how much akin to an unfathered fruit the narrator poet is experiencing a feeling of futility and lack of contentment at the current situation of his relationship. We also see the vision of an old December. This has two meanings, either meaning the waning year coming to an end, or having an eternal nature and never seeming to come to an end, as seen with the idea of dark days seen. There is no light at the end of the tunnel for the narrator. The word bearing here has the connotation of childbearing, and it's followed by the idea of the wanton burden of the prime, showing the awesome responsibility of bearing children, awesome being used in its original connotation, and then this idea of widowed wombs. After their lord's decease, lords can be used to describe either a husband or a father figure, showing that neither the widow nor the baby that is to come have any sort of compass or guide to follow. Lastly, to round out this slide, we have the idea of personification as seen in the end of the sestet. We have summers and his pleasures waiting, and leaves which are dreading the winters near, and this is because the seasons and the objects within the seasons are taking the active role in place of the absent acquaintance of the poet. And here are the complete explications and analysis from this slide. Overall, the message and purpose of this poem is that Shakespeare, or the poet narrating this poem, is lamenting over not having seen his male acquaintance in a while, and how this has affected his life. And my thesis concept as of now involves the motif of childbearing/infertility being used by Shakespeare to promote the cynical nature of time, such as the nature of time seen in seasons. This part won't be in the thesis, but it will be used throughout the essay. And that shall conclude my explication of sonnet number 97. Thank you for watching.